All right, fellas. I just need to check something real quick. But I have a theory, something I'm gonna look into. So I've been thinking about Armor Core 6's storyline and stuff. Basically, if you haven't played the story, feel free to go play it. Don't watch this if you don't want any spoilers. But my question being right now is I don't know if I got all of the dialogue and all of the story snippets and things. There's also pictures that you can collect in game that kind of show you what people look like and stuff like that. We know there's a connection between, let's say, Walter and um, RA, RAD, Cinder. There's a connection in between there. Potentially the two assistants that were helping at the laboratory and such. We know Walter has some sort of inclination there. There's also talk about a kid that was a son of one of the assistants or the scientist or a kid of one of them, and they were being forced to stay at the lab or something along those points. And the way this originally started up was if Armor Core 6 became popular enough for DLC or another game to be made. And then I got to thinking about it, and I was like, it actually would solve a few of the problems. Um, because they could technically, I mean, one, they could put any game out after the events, but would be probably more in line with things as if they actually did the prequel to Armor Core 6. So, uh, I don't know exactly what the name would be, but let's say Armor Core 6 Fall of Rubicon or Armor Core 7 or whatever they call it, Fall of Rubicon. Um, and then they could show the other side of how things happen because the way they could do that is basically just have the story endings to where Rubicon still gets lit on fire and everyone ends up dying, but you could have big emotionally involved characters and stuff helping each other, fighting each other and stuff over the fall of Rubicon before everything ended. And then that would give more weight to the mechs and other things that you find in Armor Core 6 right now, Fires of Rubicon. All these mechs that you find that are laying around that have little snippets of data, all these little pictures that, these are all people or characters that you could potentially know, like some of the mech parts that you find. I think it would make sense that if they made a prequel to the game, they would be able to um, add in emotionally driven characters, and then towards the end of the game, they could just wipe out clean slate, and it wouldn't affect Armor Core 6 that much. But then it would give more replay value or more connection to the storyline in in Fires of Rubicon. I think that would be a really interesting way to kind of think about this. But while I was thinking on this, I realized that it seems like so things are kind of color coded in Fires of Rubicon. It's something I haven't really thought about considering all the other games. So I need to look at my lore snippets that I have so far in the game, and I also need to read a couple of the weapons descriptions. But basically, the same ways like your starting mech gear says that it's developed by Rad. Arquebus and stuff tends to make a lot of the laser tech. The coral tech is all usually red. But there's also the starting sword that you have on your mech is like a light blue, like a sea green kind of looking thing. And with those colors, there's only a few weapons that are actually that color. There's a couple of like energized electric beam pods, but really it's All Mind is the only boss that I can think of that has similar color schemes. The All Mind boss endings has that same sort of green tint to it. Um, Even though it did have the sea machines and stuff with it as well. So my question becomes, who exactly made All Mine? Because I would think it would be Arquebus. It seems like that's what was going on, but Arquebus wasn't trying to release the coral. So it would almost seem like Arquebus was kind of hidden on the planet, or since your mercenary has access to a a laser blade that has a similar color scheme, would they have a connection to whatever the source of that blade was? And depending on if that's new tech or if that's tech left over from when you were originally made, um, I don't really know, but like in my head, it kind of has a theory where maybe All Mind was in development during the time of Coral, or maybe it was a little bit after, but the color scheme just seems a little bit off because every time that you see red, it's basically Coral in there. Every time you see blue, it's like the Plasma Arquebus stuff. And like the light blue, I guess you can consider it Arquebus tech, but maybe not. I don't fully understand. And this is why we need to look into that. I'm curious about it because Walter and Cinder are the watchers basically. This is what I'm thinking, okay? If Rad helped build your robot mech at the beginning of the game and all the equipment that you have would be probably associated with them, let's say, then that means that they could potentially have been the source of the plasma sword, and then the watchers are trying to watch over the coral, but maybe they tried to make some sort of artificial intelligence to help them watch over the coral or find the coral, and then the coral or the All Mind ends up becoming more self-aware and like going after the coral itself, and maybe that like puts a rush on things. But that's probably, I'm sure All Mind's probably part of Arquebus, but we don't get an Arquebus story ending that I've seen yet because technically on our 3 playthroughs they had us. It says that we already did all the missions, so I get that. But another part of me thinks we should have an Arquebus story ending because you can sort of team up with them during a couple of the playthroughs, or at least one of them. I think the All Mind story mission you get to team up with them, but All Mind isn't a part of Arquebus, or it betrays them, one or the other. But also some of the Arquebus characters use mechs that were designed by All Mind. But also, a lot of the in-game bosses had mechs that were also in All Mind's programming, which kind of throws me off, And then All Mind, as we've seen, is the thing that controls the planetary defense laser, um, which you have to get past at the very beginning of the game to get to the surface of the planet. And I would assume if Walter and Cinder and all of them had been there or been a part of the Watcher group beforehand, that they would have known about All Mind or had some sort of knowledge that something was around. Like they would have to know about the canon, and why wouldn't they just take over the canon unless maybe like the corporations took it over, and maybe the corporation stuck All Mind there, and then All Mind ended up betraying the corporation. But I don't know if I'm fully piecing together all the puzzle pieces here because it seems weird that if the Watchers were watching the planet for so long that they wouldn't have control over it. I guess they're not strong enough to defend the planet themselves, so the corporations just naturally kind of came in and start taking things. But the other thing is, who is the kid for the scientist? So there's at least one or two snippets of data that you can find in the game that talks about a kid to one of the assistants or the scientist and keeping it at the lab or something else along those lines. And then in that sense, you're thinking, well, who is that? If the kid, on one hand, I think there was a snippet about the kid being sent to a planet, and then I think there was also some talk about the kid getting stuck at the lab. Like it was either they got sent to a planet or they got kept at the lab. And you would kind of think if Cinder is someone that was left over from before, and it almost seems like because we never see Cinder physically. Every time that we've seen Cinder, she's been inside of a mech, and we know that she makes AI. Um, so the silent guy is basically AI. So did she try to make an AI that ended up being All Mind, and it kind of went wrong? Is she older than Walter, and they just happened to team up a little bit later because she didn't really know at the beginning, I guess? Or were they pretty much always working together? It's like I don't know if Walter's left over from that period of time or not, but we've seen Walter in physical form in the videos. We haven't seen Cinder in physical form. But if Cinder is the scientist and she's inside that robot body, and she's been alive all this time, and she's making AI, it would come to think that, well, maybe she built AI to try and watch the coral on the planet, and it kind of went awry. Um, and then the second part would be this kid. I don't know if it's a boy or a girl or what. I don't really recall off the top of my head. But if it went to a different planet, is that potentially Walter? But Walter's saying that he got this task from his friend, which could be, I guess if he was around and alive when everything happened, but it's been a while, like a few centuries since that event. So unless he's extended his life for some period of time or was in hibernation as well with you, maybe he's augmented in some way as well and was able to hibernate himself for a while. The only other thing is that um, why exactly is Arya the spirit that gets stuck in your head? You know, because I think there's a few options. Like the kid could be Walter. The kid could be and like died in the burning and has just been trapped and ended up in your suit, or maybe your pilot has something to do with. We also don't know exactly how old the kid is necessarily. So if they made a prequel for and they had the kid um factors and stuff, and then friend or your father or whatever sacrifice himself to burn Rubicon, but before that happened, and then let's say that Cinder and Walter and them were able to rescue you after the event and put you in stasis, something along those lines. But basically, I don't know if I'm going to or not, but when I get home at some point, I want to look at that laser blade and then a couple of the item descriptions and just kind of see. I know we have a couple of the blue items, so we just need that kind of lighter green. I think we have at least the back item, and then we have the blade. So just kind of look at that for a little bit, kind of see what it says, and then look over a few of those data points, I guess. I don't know how many I'm missing, but I don't recall a whole lot about All Mind in general. All we know is that All Mind is for all mercenaries, which makes me think that it's not um it's and Almond had the Raven mech in its designs. I don't know if it gave the Raven its designs, but we know that the Raven had um I believe a Melander mech was the first one that we saw it in, and then it got the new mech and came and fought us later with that, and then you had those couple of other independent mercenaries that were with them. But if All Mind augmented them in some way or changed their mechs designs, um, I'm kind of interested in that. I don't know exactly what it would mean, but it's just, I don't know. I think there's a puzzle piece here that we're missing and could potentially open the door if they were to make a prequel or a sequel or something like a DLC add-on. That could open up doors into the storyline beforehand. Like they wouldn't necessarily have to add more um, Fires of Rubicon content, even though they could with Arquebus and all that stuff, add some more endings or some more details stuff in there. But if they did a prequel version, they could also use some of the same maps technically as well, like the floating city and stuff. You could use like a non-destroyed version of it in the old settings. Like basically all these maps that you see, if those were there before the fires, you could technically have versions of those that aren't destroyed or whatever, have slight changes, and then just alter all the characters and stuff as well. But I'm gonna hop off here, and we'll be home in a few hours. We'll see